Winter conditions have arrived in the hills, so I thought I'd have a look at a tent that I don't use that much, but which I do take out when there's winter conditions, especially if snow is forecast or very high winds, and that is the Hilleberg Soulo tent, which is probably the toughest tent I have. As the name suggests, it's a one person only tent. It is quite heavy at 2.48 kilos, which is what this one weighs, with the few extra pegs I've added to it just in case. And if there's much snow, the weight goes up a bit more because I take big snow pegs to hold it down. I wouldn't take it on a long backpacking trip outside of winter because of the weight. However, if I want to camp high in the mountains and the forecast looks like snow or high winds, this is the tent I would choose because it is so strong. It's a 3-pole dome tent, and it's designed to be pitched in bad weather, which I will pitch it now and show how that works, as long as it doesn't start raining or snowing, which looks likely at the moment. Now the Soulo, as you can see, is quite bulky. However, if I remove the poles, which are quite bulky in themselves, but can easily go on the outside of a pack or down the inside standing upright, then it can be squashed down to make it much easier to get in the rucksack. The first thing I do is get the poles ready. It does come with, in here there is a spare pole section with a sleeve just in case of breakages. Put this to one side. If it was very windy, I'd put this in the rucksack so it couldn't blow away. Now there are 3 poles, and they are colour coded because whilst 2 are the same length, one of them is slightly shorter. And put the poles down carefully. The poles are at their most vulnerable when you're doing this. You don't want to tread on them or snap them into place. This is the red label Soulo, which is the standard one. There is a black label Soulo which has thicker diameter poles for even greater strength. It's even heavier. I've never used that one. Now, having got the poles ready, and take out the tent, put the stuff sack in a pocket. Again, I don't want it to blow away. Here are the pegs. These are the ones that actually came with the tent. I sometimes take a different selection, and as I said, when it's snowy, I'll take snow pegs. These are just 16 centimetre V pegs, which are adequate for most uses. Now, the tent, the Soulo, is not symmetrical one end is narrower than the other, and that's the end away from the door, and that is the end that you want into the wind, which is not significant here today, but if there was a breeze, I would ensure that that end is into the wind, and this end, which is wider, is away from the wind, with the door there. And undo some of the guy lines and ensure that this black cord is meant to be under the tent, not on top of it. Now again, if it was breezy, I would peg down one or two of the corners. As there's no wind, I'm not going to do that. The tent is freestanding. You don't need to peg it down to get the shape. But then starting with one of the longer poles, which go into a sleeve which has a blue stripe on it, and make sure that it goes right into the corner firmly, and then put it into the sleeve at the other end on the other side, and again making it sure it goes in. And then do the same with the other long pole. And then the short pole goes over these two. There is a red stripe there, and there's red tape on the pole. Get that fully seated. And now you can see that the shape of the tent is up. You have the three poles which cross in three places for strength, but most of the tent is not raised. This is really useful in strong winds because you don't have too much flapping material. At this point, the rest of the tent clips onto the poles, and the way to do this, again, if it's not windy it doesn't matter, but if it's windy it's best to go round the tent and raise it equally at each side so that the whole thing is coming up like this, and you've not raised one side which is then extremely vulnerable to catching the wind. So round and round we go. I'll do 2 at this end, and as you can see, the tent is slowly rising up and taking shape. And we're almost there. And the last clips, and now the tent is feeling very solid. Even without the guy lines, and that is significant because it will stand quite a lot of snow. In fact, I've had it completely buried in fresh snow and it has not collapsed or hardly sagged much at all. Now when it's like this, you'll notice this triangle here, this is a big vent. So if the weather's fine, there's no chance of snow or rain, and it's not that windy, you can just have that open. Ventilation then is superb. However, in the conditions in which I'm usually, not always, using this tent, I've missed a clip, which is easily done. You want to cover that up, and there is a cap for doing so. Now this clips, it's permanently attached on the other side. The detachments are adjustable, and it has clips on this side, also adjustable, which attach to rings. And there we go. And then you've got protection for that vent, which could still be left open, but you're now not going to get any rain inside. So the tent is now up. However, again, unless it's calm, in which case you're probably not using it, you want to peg out the guy lines. And possibly the corners of the tent as well. There are 2 guy lines on each pole, end of each pole, so 6 guy lines, 12 guy lines, there's 2 on each in total. When pegging out the guy lines, the upper one, the webbing it's attached to goes round the pole, which gives extra strength. You can peg them out separately. I usually peg them out together, but the ground might mean that it makes more sense to do it separately, and I always have enough pegs for that. And then the same with the side ones, wrapping that webbing round the pole. And starting out with the guy lines fairly long. Again, the ground allowing. And these side ones come out at an angle like this. And they should be tight enough to tension the tent, but not so tight at either end that they in any way distort the shape of the tent. So this is the tent pitched. So you could attach a guy line there if necessary, but now we'll have a look at the inside. And the only real complaint I have about this tent, which is where the door is, which is purely personal. It's just I like in the tent to lie on my left side and look out of the door. Well, if I lie on my left side in here, I'm looking at that. So I'd rather the door was on the other side, but that's purely personal. Probably doesn't bother a lot of people, and obviously I do adapt to it fine. There is ample room for one person in the side, certainly at my height of 5'8". I have room at the foot and at the head, and the space for me to put stuff at the back here. There are some little pockets for small items. The headroom is very good. It's considerably more than the Acto, even with a thick, winter mat in here, which in itself takes up, 6 or 7 centimeters of height. My head still does not touch the top. The inner door opens the whole length of the tent, so you can see the porch. There's just room for cooking in the porch as it is, with a low profile stove, but if you want to, you can unclip the inner and pull it back a bit to make more room. And as I say, there is ample room for me in here. I can sit in the middle, cross-legged. My head's nowhere near the top. And if I lie down, my feet and head are nowhere near the ends. But as I say, this may be different if you're 6'4" or so. The vent can be operated from inside and you can roll it back if you want. The inner door is solid or mesh, so you can, if you just want the mesh door to keep out insects if you're using it at that time of year, or perhaps just cut the breeze a little, you can just have a mesh door, or you can have the full solid door. And that's the vent now, mostly zipped up, but you can roll it out of the way, which I would normally do unless there was snow. And there is a toggle here for stopping it flopping down. And overall, it's a good little tent, as I say, for wild conditions where you really want maximum protection, but not for, well, certainly not for lightweight backpacking at this weight and at the bulk it takes in or on the rucksack. But anyway, that's my look at the Soulo. Oh, I'll just do up the inner door. Just one point I noticed, which applies any tents that have three-way zips like this, which I like, but they do mean you get a small hole where the zips meet, which midges could get through. So if you're using this in mid-season, which I don't do, you can stick a tiny bit of paper or something to block that hole, which I have done with other tents where this has been a potential problem. Anyway, this is the Soulo. I expect I shall be using it soon.